Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from New York, this is Wisdom of the Sages, your daily yoga podcast. Today, I'm your host, Kaustubha Das. Raghunath is in London, and he's filming something, and he couldn't be with us here today. But as usual, we have Mara here. Good morning, Mara.
Good morning, Prabhu.
And we have our very special guest host, Vaisesika Prabhu. Vaisesika Prabhu, good. Welcome to you. Welcome back to Wisdom of the Sages.
Thank you very much. I've been biding my time, waiting to come back and see everybody.
We always love to see you. We always get such wonderful responses when you're here. So it's a joy to have you here as always.
Well, the feeling is mutual.
Okay. And before we get started, we're going to talk about Bhagavad Gita today. And we're going to talk about Bhagavad Gita today and tomorrow. Raghunath is traveling tomorrow too, so we're going to have our brother from another mother, Parmananda, on. We'll also be discussing Bhagavad Gita because tomorrow is Prabhu. I've heard that actually Gita Jayanti is not the proper term. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard it, but
Okay.
it does the job.
Okay, so we'll use it today. We'll say Gita Jayanti, right? Which we could say
Sure.
the advent of the Gita. I don't know if there's another Sanskrit term that we should be using.
We changed it in our marketing team to World Gita Day
Okay.
because a lot of people around the world don't know what Jayanti means at all. So our branding in the course of making Bhagavad Gita more popular in all the languages of the world is World Gita Day.
World Gita Day. So we're going to call it World Gita Day. Tomorrow is World Gita Day, which marks the advent of the Gita, the day apparently that the Gita was spoken on. And so there's worldwide celebrations, and there's also a drive to distribute 2.2 million Bhagavad Gitas on tomorrow. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to share with all of you the information if you would like to take part. But before we get into that, Mara, are there any announcements that we should make today?
Oh yeah, we have Bhakti recovery group meetings today at 1 and 9:30.
1
And
and
Katie
9:30.
Bell is doing an asana class for Patreon members at 9 p.m. this evening.
Wonderful. And if people are interested in the Bhakti Recovery Group, which is a 12-step approach, but infused with Bhakti and infused with an understanding of that higher power as being Sweet Baby Krishna, then you can write to bhaktirecoverygroup@gmail.com. Or always, anytime you can write to us at Wisdom of the Sages 108. We'll take care of Mara. Will take care of you too. All right? Okay. So then let's go ahead and get started. Vaisesika Prabhu, could you just tell us a bit about this drive to distribute the Gitas as widely as possible tomorrow?
Well, really, knowledge is meant to be shared. We feel like any community really is. Community means communication. There has to be some common goal, bring people together. And the world is a world community also. We're all human beings. And as much as we can align our mission in life and find a universal cause that everyone can sign on to, the more we can actually have a cohesiveness in the world, which doesn't seem to be happening that much these days. And so
quite the opposite.
The founder of ISKCON, who also founded his own book trust and produced the Bhagavad Gita as it is, was keen on getting the Bhagavad Gita in the hands of people in every country and every language. So there have been teams of people working on it for many years now. And now it's in hundreds of languages. And our goal has been to work systematically throughout 7 continents, including Antarctica. We're looking for volunteers anyway, if somebody wants to go there.
I just heard that there are people in Antarctica. Just yesterday, we had Shama Sundar Prabhu on the show, and he was talking about that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to be in touch with them because we're doing quite well in all the other 6 continents. We haven't made a lot of contacts. I didn't know if there was just penguins or what.
Did you hear about that?
No, please tell.
Just yesterday, he said that it sounded like there's some Indian people based there for some reason.
Well, I'll call him today then.
Yeah. And
I'll call Shamashuna and find out. That's good.
And I think he said they're doing Bhagavad Gita classes and stuff like that.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, that's a dream come true for me.
Okay.
We have a team and we have 7 continental teams, 6 actually, but we're all working together as one big team to create a pipeline so that the Bhagavad Gita goes out to as many people as possible. And to inspire us, we set goals every year. Last year it was 2 million and we beat it by just a little bit. So we keep inching up the goal. Now it's 2.2 million. And it's a lot of fun. People drop everything, and many of the people around the world, and put their hearts and souls into this to make sure the Bhagavad Gita is going out to many places, hospitals, schools, prisons, in the hands of people, door to door, all over the world.
When you started to describe it, it sounded, Srila Prabhupada, when he officially incorporated the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he created 7 purposes. And the way you're speaking, I don't know if it was intentionally or if it's just you become habituated to thinking that way, but it was like coming straight from those purposes. And the first purpose that he wrote was to these are the purposes for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge. And I always think this is where he starts, right? It wasn't to convert people to any particular religion, but there is spiritual knowledge that is something that can be understood in all spiritual traditions. And so his first, yeah.
Yep.
Please.
Well, that's so true. And I was thinking it's true of the Bhagavad Gita itself. It's not religious fanaticism. It's pertinent information that everyone can use to figure out how the world works. You need a handbook when you get a new device, right? Figure out which part goes first, second, third. And Bhagavad Gita is like that. Even at the end, Krishna, after he gives his student all the information, then he says, okay, now you know how to work it. Are you going to do it?
Well, Raghunath and I always say, like you buy something at IKEA, and then when you get home, you figure, I can put this together without looking at the thing. But you always suffer because of it. So to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large and to educate all people in techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. This was really the goal. This is why we do Wisdom of the Sages. It's because, are our values, very well thought, or do they lead to further, conflict and suffering? And how are we doing on achieving unity and peace? So this was the first purpose that he wrote, and the last of the 7 is with a view toward achieving the aforementioned purposes to publish and distribute periodicals, magazines, books, and other writings. So it's a fact that, just in one sense, just through a big effort to just blow this information out there, right? To just like publish these books and get them out there, and do it in big chunks, like in the millions. It does have a powerful effect. People read them and they sink in on all different levels. The information in them, some people are going to pick it up and say, "Oh, I want to learn everything about this and follow it and make this part of my life." But it also works in more subtle ways, or more gradual ways, or more like pervasive ways, where people begin, since these books have been coming out, we've seen, the way people think about what they eat, and ideas like vegetarianism, which were not very popular in the Western world, have become far more popular. The idea about animal rights and and so many other things. The books are powerful. So what we want to do is we want to offer all of you the opportunity to participate in this drive, to distribute 2.2 million Gitas around the world. And we did this last year, and I was so grateful for everyone's participation, and we're trying to do even more this year. So here's three ways you can three ways you can participate. Number one is that these are all what they have cases of hardbound Bhagavad. It's all hardbound. I heard that they ran out of the softbound, the paperback ones.
Yeah, there's a little bit of supply chain problem right now in the world.
Yeah, right. So, but they have plenty of the hardbound ones, which is wonderful too.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And so there's 16 hardbound Bhagavad Gitas in a case. And so you can get a case yourself, and it could be sent to you, and you can give them to your friends or get several, however many cases you want. You can sponsor a case of hardbound Gitas, and they will distribute them on your behalf. And you can choose where you'd like them to go. They can go to hospitals. They can go to frontline workers like firefighters and so on. They can go to prisons. They can go to motels. They can go to libraries. You tell them where you wanted to go. They'll take care of you. Or you can have it sent to any friends, or sent wherever you like. And it doesn't have to be a case. It could be even one copy. They're happy to help. I think they may struggle to do it internationally, but even if you are international, you want to have them and you want to take part, at the very least, they'll be able to distribute them within the United States. So if you'd like to do it that way. It costs $120 for a case. That includes shipping and everything. And if you would like to participate, this is how you do it. You call this number 1-669-289-5563. I repeat, 1-669-289-5563. And you'll speak with Malini, Devi Dasi there. She's a wonderful person. She's really gets involved in all of this, and she's very helpful and cooperative and easy to work with. And if you don't get a hold of her, just leave a message there. She'll get back to you, and just help out on whatever level you feel you can or you would like to. We'll share that information again before we end the show. But it certainly means a lot to me if people want to participate in this. We had Vaisesika Prabhu, you were also kind of heading up a drive earlier in the year for the Bhadra Purnima back in September, where the goal was to distribute. What was the goal for that? That was distributing full sets of Srimad Bhagavatam.
That's right. Full sets of Srimad Bhagavatam. The goal worldwide was 25,000. You'll be happy to know, too, much thanks to Wisdom of the Sages, everybody here.
He
did huge. That was really big.
It was wonderful to see everyone participate. And I'm still just yesterday I got a I think it was yesterday, the day before, I got an email from Stephanie Berman, who's just a wonderful person. She's helped myself in the Bhakti Center a lot. She's like a high level creative director for advertising agencies. She's done a lot for us, and she got her set of Bhagavatam, and she was just thrilled. She said she was like almost shaking when she opened it up, and but it was wonderful to see. So that was a real successful drive. Your goal was to distribute?
Goal was 25,000. We exceeded. We did 35,000 plus.
Wow, 35,000 sets of Bhagavatam. Those are 18 volume sets.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So, any case, please participate if you can and if you'd like to, and we'll share that information with you again. But Vaisesika Prabhu, just to stir up our Gita enthusiasm, I thought maybe you and I could just discuss the Bhagavad Gita today.
Oh, I'd love that.
Okay, maybe we could just start by your sharing, just in your own life, what has the Gita meant to you?
It was 1972. I was in high school, sophomore, and a friend of mine knew I was eclectically spiritual and brought me a small copy of the Bhagavad Gita. It was just translations. And I had no exposure to the Eastern wisdom literatures before that. But when I got that little Bhagavad Gita, it just changed my life completely. I started reading it every day. Practically, I read the whole thing every day. I couldn't wait to get home from school to read it. And that started me really on my spiritual path to bhakti. And then I came in contact with my spiritual master's Bhagavad Gita, called Bhagavad Gita as It Is. And it's been a mainstay in my life since then. Every day I read Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, that's part of your regular daily sadhana.
That's right. Yeah, to at least one chapter a day. There's a suggestion I got from Prabhupada. He said to all his students that at least do one chapter of Bhagavad Gita a day, at least just the translations, because it, I have this guidance that, don't shop when you're hungry. Because when you go in the store, you're walking around, it's like, hey, why'd I buy that?
Okay.
And it's the same thing. I don't like to go out and interact with the world until I've read at least a little Bhagavad Gita, because it tells me, how to move without getting injuring others or myself, and actually how to have enlightened engagement with the world.
Right. Now, just looking at the Gita, not exactly historically, but just like trying to understand what's special about it. There are different spiritual traditions, and usually they have a book. Within the Christian tradition, there's the Bible, and etc. Within you could say the broader Vedic tradition or the yoga tradition, there's so many books. But somehow the Bhagavad Gita stands out, as unique, as by far the most read and quoted of all the books coming out of the Vedic tradition. Could you share to us a little bit about just like what is the Gita? Like, why is this particular collection of 700 verses? Why is it so popular? Why is it so important? What is unique about it?
Well, one thing that's unique is that it's considered to be both Shruti and Smriti. So in the overall canon of wisdom literatures, there's these literatures called Shruti, which are written in Sanskrit. They're these original mantras that tell how to do many kinds of rituals to live in harmony with the material world and elevate oneself. And then it comes to the Upanishads, which are the transcendental part of the Vedas, which are also called Shruti. And then there's books that come after that called Smriti, which explain the procedures and how to actually practically live one's life in a spiritual way. And also it keeps the highest goal. So the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, who's considered by all the Vedas to be the divine source of everything. So when he speaks, he summarizes all of the Vedas in 700 verses. And then it's considered to be Shruti and Smriti because it's original sound coming from source. And at the same time, it's an explanation. As you used, when you're reading the first purpose of ISKCON, that word technique is in there. And I looked it up as you were speaking. It says a way of carrying out a particular task, especially the execution or performance of an artistic work or a scientific procedure. So the Bhagavad Gita gives, in a concise way, something we can relate to, how to live our lives in such a way that we have union with the Supreme and we can live happily.
In a way that hadn't quite been done before in that tradition.
Yeah, because in any tradition, people often get tangled up in all the details and all the rituals, and they forget about the purpose of it. So Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes right to the purpose. In fact, he says that this, what you get from going to many different kinds of water sources, you can get from this. This is like the river where you can take, fulfill all your water needs, everything that's there necessary.
Yeah, like in an Indian village, there's hygiene and cleanliness kind of concerns that Western people may not think as much about. But if you have different wells, for instance, one well you'll use for washing your clothes, and another well you might use for collecting water that you're going to cook with, and so on. But if there's a big river, it satisfies all your needs. Right? And so, yeah, the Gita is like that. Yeah, it's interesting because the four Vedas, in one sense, that is like, you could say, the quote unquote religious information that, of the Vedas, the rituals and a lot of the more, let's say, materialistic end of a spiritual tradition, where the idea is you have some kind of faith in something beyond, but you're really still more interested in enjoying this world in ignorance of your own deep spiritual nature. And then, there's the Upanishads, which are kind of swing the pendulum the other way and say, why are you trying to enjoy this world? You are spirit. You are beyond all this. Let it all go. Walk away from it. Renounce this world. And the Gita, you get this clarification or this synthesis of the two ideas, right? That we can understand that there's more to life than the things of this world. And we can deepen our realization of that, and through that experience our own spiritual nature, which is really the goal of all yoga and the goal of life. But you can do it without walking away from the world, which the Upanishadic literature it lends itself more easily to that interpretation. In the Gita, finally, you had this more complete picture of how you can be in this world and not of it. And through 700, just, really, just really not complicated, not vague, but clear, through 700 clear verses, really understanding how I can live in this world and take up all the responsibilities that I need, and that not only will my social responsibilities as a mother or a father, as a husband or wife, as a parent, as a person in society, in the business world, not only will embracing those roles not deter me from my spiritual path, but they can become a very effective and important part of my spiritual path. And now you've finally opened up deep spirituality, not piety, not just piety, not just escapism, like spiritual escapism, but like spiritual engagement in the world. And perhaps that's more relevant in today's day, than it ever has been before.
Yeah, it's also a conversation that we can listen in on, which is it's an interesting framing, because Sanjaya is speaking to his king, his Dhritarashtra, who wants to know what's going on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. It's this big battle that's about to take place. And that's a time when everyone's leaning in, like, what's going to happen now? And the king wants to know, because his sons are involved in the battle. Sort of a clash between good and evil in a way. And then this mystic Sanjaya is able to actually envision what's happening on the battlefield and is relating it to Dhritarashtra. And then it starts into a conversation with Krishna and his student Arjuna, who's actually his friend. So it's easy to relate to, because Arjuna asks a lot of questions, and I always thought, yeah, I would like to know that too. So you kind of get the benefit of listening in on the most elevated conversation. It's very relatable.
And it's so life changing to, like, I remember once I heard you give a talk, and you at the Bhakti Center, and we kind of build it as, I forget exactly how it was, but it was like 3 steps to like deepen your spiritual life or something like that. You remember that?
Yeah.
And it's, and it sounds almost like, I don't know, presumptuous or too simple that it's that easy. And you said here's one of them. You just do this one simple step, and it will immediately have a deep, profound, transformative effect on your spiritual life. And you just said what you said earlier today. Just read Bhagavad Gita every day, right? Just pick up that book, open up, read the verses. If you actually do that, it's going to have a very powerful effect on your spiritual life. And it's so true, that this conversation is like, it's just so potent. It's just so relevant. And there's something, deeply spiritual about it, that when you read it, it changes your life. I think so many people have said that when they read this book throughout their life, that every time they read it, that it speaks to them in new ways. Gandhi said that, and I know so many people who've had that experience with it.
Yeah, Thoreau, Emerson, they had profound statements about it's a a voice of wisdom speaking to us, the same kind of voice that speaks to us from within our own heart, and that those voices resonate with one another. One of the powerful nature of kind of revealed wisdom is that it resonates with us. And this was one of the important points that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought up, and that is it's self-effulgent. It proves itself. When you listen to it, when you hear it, it's so commonsensical and it's so deeply resonant that there's a way that you can't deny it, and it really fills you up. So it's not an intellectual exercise necessary, although the intellect is also satisfied by the book. The philosophy is reasonable, and it helps overcome doubts about, is there a higher energy beyond just the material world? But there's also a sense, in hearing the Bhagavad Gita, it's so effulgent in and of itself, the points that Krishna brings up, and so relatable that it feels very real.
There's this saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And in one sense, it is that source of relief for us, but we don't always drink it. It's like sometimes, just due to, I think, particularly with the influence of social media and computers and media, that the mind becomes a little soft or a little weak, and we don't want to pick up a book and read so much. It's hard, and if we do, sometimes it's hard to concentrate. It's difficult, but I like a lot of like the kind of techniques that you share, wherein if you do this, like say you make a little vow, I'm going to read one chapter of the Gita a day. Even do it like one time, that'll take 18 days. And by the time those 18 days are done, and it doesn't take long at all, like some of these chapters are quite short, so just to read that many verses, you put in 15, 20 minutes a day, sometimes less, 10 minutes or so, to read a chapter. But by the time you complete it on the 18th day, already you're finding that those muscles that were so soft are starting to get a little stronger now, and you're developing a bit of taste. And you read one chapter and you're like, maybe I'll just read 2 today, because you're beginning to realize, actually, this is nourishing me. This is, it's actually refreshing to fill my mind with, although my lazy mind just wants to veg out on Netflix or whatever. When I read this chapter, it makes me feel good. I feel something very nourishing and very satisfying about it, and I want to do more. And so we have to regulate ourselves a little bit like that. And when we do, and we find that actually that taste starts to grow.
At Kaustubha, based on that, I thought of how every year on this World Gita Day, we get together and we sing the whole Bhagavad Gita, all 700 verses. And afterwards, everyone always says the same thing. Can we do it again tomorrow? As you think like, wow, that's, it's 3 hours to do that, sitting 3 hours at least. And then, I'm wondering, how's everybody doing? Are you guys okay? And afterwards, people call me and they say, why don't we just do this every week? Or, we keep doing it. So, at first you said the mind has this thing like, I'd rather look at social media. But once the mind gets engaged, it actually gets a higher taste. And you want to do it again and again.
It's in the Gita Mahatmya that was composed by Shankaracharya, and which Srila Prabhupada quotes in full in his introduction to Bhagavad Gita. He mentions it. It's like a bath, right? It's like taking a refreshing bath when you do it, and that's the kind of thing you need to do every day, And but it is so satisfying. I remember that time that you and I did that at the Broome Street Temple. Do you remember?
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks for remembering that.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Where you have a fire, and with every verse that you chant, the 700 verses, you chant Svaha and throw some grains or some ghee into the fire and read every single verse, and then discuss the chapters a little bit. Beautiful practice. Yeah, try it. Just try it. That's just my humble advice.
Well, listen to this, Kaustubha. At
Yeah.
the end of the Bhagavad Gita, the one who's passing it on, as I mentioned, Dhritarashtra, he's hearing the conversation through mystic yoga, and then he's relating the conversation to the king. He says, "Thus I have heard the conversation of two great souls, Krishna and Arjuna, and so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end."
Yeah. Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Goosebumps. Yeah. So Prabhu, let's just like tap in a little bit into your own Bhagavad Gita enthusiasm. Maybe you'd like to share with us any favorite passages or any verses and what they've meant to you, or things that you currently like to reflect on from the Gita.
Oh, sure. One is very practical, because one of my sayings that guides me in life is, where attention goes, energy flows. And one of the main topics of the Bhagavad Gita are the varieties of energies in the world. And this is called tattva. Means we have to understand that there's difference in energies, and the way we invest our attention in these energies will have a different outcome. And so Krishna very clearly defines the lower and higher energies. So the two verses that go really well together, and it really helps the process of deciding how we're going to live our lives and where we're going to give ourselves and our attention. He gives this catalog of the lower material energies, and it goes like this: Bhumir apo analo vayu kammano buddhirevacha ahankara ityame binna prakritir ashtara. This is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are the subtle and gross material elements. And then he says, there's a higher energy. Aparayamitasthanyam prakritam vinimi param jivabhuta mahabaho yayedam daryate jagat. Besides these lower energies, there's a higher energy, and that's you. The soul, the conscious living being. You are that higher energy. You're ensconced in the lower energies. And this is a platform from which Krishna then explains why we have trouble with the material energy, because it's actually foreign to us. It's a grosser energy, and a subtler energy, the subtler energy that we are, can't really enjoy a grosser energy. There's nothing in it for us, but we try to keep arranging it and rearranging it to get it to work. And I don't know about all of you, but I haven't been very satisfied with the outcome so far. But this is one of the jumping off points that I really like to come back to and say, like, yes, there are higher and lower energies, and no wonder I'm not satisfied. I'm not concentrated in the right place.
Yeah, he says that it is such, going back to what we read earlier about the 7 purposes, and the first one being, to share spiritual knowledge, right? Transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And what does that mean? It means, people use these kind of terms in such a vague way, spirituality. But in one sense, it's very simple, right? It's saying like, well, look, nobody's told you this in school before, although how could we have gone to school and never even at least talked about this, at least in theory, right? That there are 2 kinds of energies that are operating in this world. Like you're saying, if you need a manual, this is the very most basic thing, right? There's the material energy, which includes all those things that are making up your body and the world around you. And it's saying it in a very general way: earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then there's the more subtle, which is really important, right? Which, the mental realm, the mind, the intelligence, the ego. And that's the package that you're moving around in, right? But you're different than that. You're made of spiritual energy. And what is the nature of spiritual energy? In one sense, Krishna's already talked about this if you go back to the 2nd chapter, right? That the soul is eternal, that it never dies, right? That you've been through many, many bodies in one lifetime. It's like you're taking these bodies off like a pair of clothes and then putting on it, just as you take off your clothes at the end of the day and put on a new pair at the next day. It's like that with your body. But you're that spark of spiritual energy that's within it, and you never die. And so then in the 7th chapter, when he brings up the verses there's verses 4 and 5 from the 7th chapter, he says that first there's the material energy, And then he says, which we call prakriti. And then he says, prakriti vidi me param. Hear from me, vidi me, about this other prakriti, about this other nature, this other energy, which is param, which is higher, right? Which is eternal, which never dies. And then he gives that little clue, which is what you were speaking about. Just like, without going into too much depth in it right here, he says, well, what are we doing in these bodies? Even though we're this higher energy, what are we doing? You use the term ensconced, right? We're getting all caught up trying to, Prabhupada translates it as exploit, right? Try to use for our own purposes the other energy, the material energy. And just that very fundamental idea, that's called spiritual knowledge, right? Like, that's helping us understand who we are, how we're beyond matter, but how we're struggling within matter. Just a very fundamental idea that we never knew about until we picked up the Bhagavad Gita, you know? And so therefore we got to get, we got to share this, get this message out. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, well, I just as you were saying that, there are other nuances of that explanation. One of them is in the 3rd chapter of the Gita, when Krishna describes the hierarchy that we live within. So yes, there's higher and lower energies, and then he refines it a little more. And he says, Indriyani priyanyahur indriyabhyas param manaha manasas tu parabhudhir. Yobhudhe paratastu sat. So what this is describing how the lowest of all are the senses. And above the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intellect, the buddhi. Yeah. And above that is us. And so he gets this, he says then in the next verse that you have to fortify yourself at the level of the intelligence, so you don't just get carried away by the senses and the mind. You can just get absorbed there for a day or a week or a month or a lifetime and forget about your whole purpose. And so you have to fortify the intelligence. And one of the ways of doing that is by hearing the transcendental sound vibration and purifying the intelligence. And then you can start to perceive also that you're above even the intellect. You can see that it's being provided just like a service that's coming in, that's informing us, but we're the one that's observing even the intellect. So he helps in that way too, to give us a bird's eye view of what's actually happening within this contraption we're moving around in, the human body.
This is, we can call it transcendental knowledge, spiritual knowledge, yogic knowledge, right? But again, so fundamental if we want to live a happy life, to understand that there's part of my mental faculty that has desires, right? Desires have been impressed in it. I want this, I want that, that will make me happy. But there's a higher part of that mental faculty that where reasoning exists, that it can look at my desires and analyze them and try to make sense of whether these desires are helping me or hurting me. Are they actually bringing me happiness, or have I just been programmed to think that by chasing the things that I'm chasing, I'm going to find happiness in life? And then to understand that I'm even above that I'm the one observing both these faculties, right? I am that soul beyond it all. And with that, being able to create a strategy in life, how can I, the observer, consciously choose to fortify the intellect, the reasoning that I have in life, so that I can get my mind under control and actually move forward, move in a direction that's positive and that's helpful, and not only for myself as an individual, but if we're all going to be able to cooperate with each other, we all got to get control of this,
Kaustubha, I like that point a lot. It reminded me how in the Gita, Krishna says the goal isn't to stop desiring. In fact, he says it's impossible. That's the nature of the living force, to desire, to have ambition. But then he says you can analyze the quality of your desire by seeing its nature. So he gives a lot of examples that are very helpful about analyzing our own desires and ambitions to see if they're up to a spiritual level. As an example, it's in the context of the 3 modes of material nature, which is one of the predominant themes of the Gita. He says, so happiness. So talks about happiness. If your happiness is like nectar in the beginning, but poison in the end, you're getting an inferior kind of happiness. It's in rajas, the middle mode. If your happiness is like poison in the beginning, but nectar in the end, which we can all relate to, then it's in the mode of goodness. It's a higher kind of happiness. And the lower happiness, it's like suffering from beginning to end. You're just hurting yourself and you can't stop it. But then, then he also gives the definition of what it feels like to rise above these three conditional types of happiness. And in a single verse, he gives these symptoms you can observe in yourself. And the first one is that you become joyful for no reason. It's not like you won something or somebody called you and said, guess what? We made a clerical error and you're a lot richer than you thought. It's not like that. It's just naturally happy. We're joyful by nature, and you realize it on the spiritual platform, not anywhere else. And there's a couple more symptoms, which you know well, but just the continuing with your thought process, it helps us in so many ways to subtly analyze who are we and how are we interacting with these modes, and how do we know where we are.
Right. So even right now, just in what little we've discussed how the Gita lays out that they're two separate energies, material and spiritual, that they're of a different nature, that we are composed of spiritual energy, and therefore we're eternal, but we've become entangled in the material energy. And then let's break down that material energy a little bit more and categorize it, understand it more clearly, that even within your own mental faculty, there's different layers with different functions. And a clear understanding of that is going to help us build a strategy to move forward in life. And now you took it to another level where you're talking about the three modes of material nature, that you could also take all that material energy and divide into three categories, rajasic, tamasic, and sattvic, that each one of these, the Gita is telling us that all material energy is a blend of these three energies, just as the primary colors will blend into create so many more colors. But within every object, the influence of one of these energies is predominant, and that object radiates the influence of that particular energy. And when we come in contact with that radiation, it enters us through the senses and begins to influence our mind. Now that is a huge idea, that's something that, again, you may or may not believe it, but certainly we should all hear it at least. That's like a very important idea that's been embraced, in human society going back farther than we can trace, farther than all the other philosophies that we can trace. To this day, millions of people in the world believe in it. Shouldn't we at least know about that idea? And if we're practicing spirituality, well, isn't that a really fascinating chunk of information that may inform my practice or just how I live if I want to be happier or live a more progressive life?
Well put, Kaustubha. It reminded me also, throughout the Gita, there are ways in which the philosophy is simplified in a way that I can appreciate it in 1 second. For instance, this idea Krishna gives about how the mind can be one's best friend or worst enemy. I mean, that's, how would you like to live with your worst enemy? And he says, well, that's what you're doing if you don't take care to purify your mind.
Yeah.
Because it has these characteristics of, as in the Gita, Arjuna says, the mind is chanchala, which means like a child, a 2-year-old child. If you bring him or her into a philosophical conversation, you'll be distracted because he or she's going to be running all over the room. And then it's very strong, very determined. And also he says it's pramata, it's mad, like crazy. Mm-hmm. So that's what the mind's like when it's our enemy. We have to live with it. He said, but there's a way you can actually train the mind so it becomes your best friend. So it's always there for you and informing you in the right to make the right decisions. And that's part of the spiritual practice.
That's yoga. That's
yoga. Yeah.
I know that the Bhagavad Gita, for many people, when they pick it up, it can be intimidating. You know, some of the ideas, the concepts, the terminology are new. Sometimes there's a message there. It's a little hard to figure out exactly what it is. It's a little bit hard to follow the thread if you're coming from another tradition, you know, and it's new to you. It might be a little bit hard to follow. Why is that verse following this? What exactly is it saying? It's not, the Gita is, the way that I find it in any case, anyone can pick it up, read some verses, and get some wisdom right off the bat. But it's not the kind of book that you read one time and then you move on. It's a book that you keep with you your entire life. And as you're saying, you read it every day. You learn it from teachers, you know, who are learned in it and who can explain it well. You share it and discuss it amongst friends, you know, in different types of gatherings, you know, formal and informal. And it's, so the idea is that when you make this not just a book that I read, but when you make it a real part of your life, you know, a regular part of your life, and by regular, I mean even like daily, right? Then you begin things that were elusive to you, ideas that are going right over your head. More and more you're seeing them, and as you see the connections, it becomes very clear and becomes very simple. It's not like you have to become some kind of super genius or there's some really impossible code to break. It's just that I don't know. It's unique in its in the way it is, that it's like it's simple but like immensely profound. And as you live it and bring it into your life, it just speaks to you more and more and more and more clearly.
Yeah, I found that when I first started reading the Bhagavad Gita, I would be walking around in the world and starting to see things in the context of the Gita. As an example, the three modalities that both of us mentioned a little bit, and these are qualities of the material world. And I never really thought about it before in categories. I just think it is what it is. But then when I was walking, when I would be walking by a certain, you know, area, and I think, oh yeah, I can feel the rajas, or this passionate energy here. Yeah. And I can feel the effect it has on me. And it kind of agitates the mind a little bit. And then if you go to a forest and you feel, oh yeah, now I feel peaceful. And now I know why I feel peaceful. It's a higher mode of nature. You know, you start to interact with the world, as you're saying, in a more informed way. You know, you're not just stumbling around, bumping into things. And it's like, well, how come I don't feel good? It's like, well, you just ran into a wall, sir. You know, so it really helps you to understand how the material nature is working.
It's so important, you know, and it becomes clearer. Like you're saying, like you hear about it, then you begin to recognize it. The more you recognize it, the clearer it's becoming. And now you're seeing it everywhere. So just like, you know, sometimes I've mentioned before, but I once saw an interview with Placido Domingo, the opera singer. And he was asked, I'm trying to remember exactly what the question was, but it had to do with what he considers to be good music. And his answer, which seems like it's a very generous answer for someone who's like such a master, you know, of master vocalist and master musician, his answer was like, well, if somebody likes it, then it's good music. Right? And which is, you know, he could have been a snob or something like that, you know, so, but which, okay, I appreciate that on one level, but there's another way to look at it too, right? In other words, what effect does that music have on someone? You know, when someone hears it, do they become a better person? Do they become more peaceful, more content, more kind, more lucid in their thought? Or maybe it takes them another direction. You know, maybe they become less lucid, less clear in their thinking. Maybe they become more prone to destructive tendencies through that music. So that's another way to measure it. And the more that you're seeing that the world through the through the lens of the Gita and understanding these three modalities, the more that they become obvious right away. You know, you hear a piece of music, hey, I kind of like that. It's got a good beat. You know, there's something about it that appeals to me. But I can recognize immediately there's a tamasic element in that music, right? Maybe that's even why I'm attracted to it. Maybe there's something within my own mind that has developed an attraction for the tamasic. And although there's something attractive about it to me, I actually don't want to wallow in that too much, because I know that it'll have a particular effect, and that effect will lead towards depression. It'll lead towards some sort of self-destruction, or at the very least some type of mental cloudiness that'll make it more difficult for me to think clearly and make wise decisions and be kind and be a better person. So now that I know this and I've become used to it and I've experimented with it and I've felt it a little bit, I'm more prepared as a yogi to move through this world in a way that's always progressive and always elevating.
Yeah, I would say that the point you're making about causality and consequence is so important in our progressive lifestyle. Those who don't know what's causing what's happening to them tend to be blind, and also understanding the consequence. And one of the subtle teachings of the Bhagavad Gita is about how intention has consequence. And Krishna points out it makes a difference how you work. It's just one of the main topics of the Gita is working. And if you work with the intention of doing service, you're not doing it for yourself. In other words, like, what do I get out of this? It may look like two people are doing the exact same job, but when the intention is different, that subtle force of intention makes all the difference of whether you become entangled in the work or not, or whether it does actually do good for others or not. And I find that to be very interesting on the level of causality that you're pointing out, that the way we intend, the way our intention is formed and how we're holding that throughout our life will determine our success in life, and also whether we become entangled in the material energy or not.
Well, Prabhu, we're running a little bit low on time, but I'm so grateful for your being here. Let me repeat again the information if people would like to take part in this Bhagavad Gita drive. It's called Live to Give, and people can go to, if you just Google Live to Give, it's the actual website is, if you want to learn more about this, livetogive.webflow.io. But you can go to Live to Give and find more information on it. But there's three options. You can donate Gitas. You can buy them yourselves and distribute them to friends or family. You can sponsor cases that Malini there will help you figure out where you like to. I wanted to go to hospital. She'll make it go to a hospital for you. I wanted to go to a library. I wanted to go to a prison. Wherever you want to go, they'll make sure it gets there. You may have your own idea. They'll help you with that. Or if you just want to send one copy or 10 copies or whatever you want to do, it's available to you. Cases of 16 cost $120. And if you can, donate a case or two, and let's get this information out there. As we've been discussing, it's just fundamental information. If we make an effort, if this generation of people makes an effort to saturate the world with the Bhagavad Gita, then these thoughts will become more common, particularly in the Western world, and it's a way that we can actually. It's not so much religion, it's spirituality. It's real spiritual knowledge. So if you would like to take part, please call Malini at 1-669-289-5563. And she says you can text her, you can send it through WhatsApp, you can call her on the phone at that number, 1-669-289-5563. I think we'll throw that up on our Instagram and Facebook pages today too, so people can find it there. And Vaisesika, maybe to close out, you could just chant the Sanskrit and translation and share a thought or two about a favorite verse from the Gita.
Sure, love to do that. In the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja. Aham tang sarva papibhyo mokshayishami masuchaha. And he sort of summarizes at the end that there are so many different complicated ways of working and moving in the world, and even in the realm of yoga and spirituality. He said, but simplify the whole thing. Find out the divine source to everything, and then put all your energy there. Put your heart and soul into it. And in a simple way, it's like watering the root of a tree. And he gives this idea then, if you put it all there, then you'll get the ultimate result of everything. So Bhagavad Gita ends with this neat, very simplified idea that there's one place you can put all your love, all your energy, all your dedication into Krishna, and then everything else will come from that quite naturally. And I wanted to mention also that Malini's one of the nicest people on the planet. She's a very advanced yogini, and very enlightened person who's been working on these Gita projects for many, many years, for over a decade. She's responsible for having distributed millions of books around the world.
Wow.
And just, the opportunity to talk to her is pretty nice.
Okay, so please help. Maybe just from our Wisdom of the Sages people, we can distribute several thousand Bhagavad Gitas. That would be wonderful if we could by tomorrow. Call up today. Don't procrastinate. Try to get it done today, tomorrow at the absolute latest. Thank you all for considering that. Vaisesika Prabhu, it has been absolute, as it always is, a great joy and privilege, a blessing to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kaustubha Prabhu. The pleasure's been all mine.
Okay. And Marigan, the Bhakti Recovery groups today, at what time?
1 and 9:30. And I'll also put the phone numbers and website up in the show notes if people didn't catch it.
Right. So if you're catching this on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube or wherever else you may find it in the show notes, you can find the information about where to go to donate, sponsor those Bhagavad Gitas. Thank you, everybody. We're going to be back tomorrow with Paramananda Prabhu. Again, discussing, that'll be the actual day. The Advent, the World Gita Day, the Gita Jayanti, if you want to call it that. And we'll get more into some Gita discussion. Meanwhile, we'll get into the Kirtan end of things.